Excuse me. I just swallowed wrong there for a second. Okay, that's my dog with her bone moving across the floor there. Yes, Eva, I see. All right, so week 5, lesson number 1. Listen, this is a big week. We got a project due at the end of the week. You've already done one project, so you have an idea how I score on the rubric. I gave you the option of having the first one submitted early so you could see if you weren't doing what I was looking for. This one is very specific directions. There's 3 questions you're going to have to write a lot of explaining with, and 2 questions that are a little challenging that you'll have to show your work with. Of course, there's partial credit, but I've kept the lessons for today shorter than usual, and I kept the homework shorter than usual so that you could get a head start on your project. As always, I strongly recommend that you work with people, that you collaborate, but you must submit your own work. If you like copy and so on and so forth, then there's going to be problems. It's not going to look good. So submit your own work in your own words. Do a great job with it. Let's get on with today's shortened, or this week 5's shortened lessons. Heavy review day. Got to go over the homework. Have a do it to do. We're going to work on word problems in the quadratic equation. And as I mentioned about the project due this week, so I'm keeping things a little shorter. Here's your homework answers for the first part. Any issues or questions, make sure you reach out to me to go over them. Okay? The work is pretty self-explanatory on everything. And of course, you are doing start and stop. Okay? All right, the next page. I think you can see how important it is to be able to factor with a lead coefficient other than 1 here. Very important skill. Keep working on it. And I finished the sheet off today in number 7 with 2 standard factorings with a lead coefficient of 1, and then 2 factorings with a lead coefficient other than 1. All right, again, if you have any further questions on these, if you can speak to each other, if you can follow where your mistake might have been through looking at these sheets, or if you want to reach out and contact me, we will go over it. Today's do it. Get started, and then I'll go over the correct answers in just, well, shorten my time. You do stop and start. Do both questions. Okay, so working on this first one here. Remember, we always want it to equal 0. So my first step is to subtract 45 from both sides. That gives me x squared minus 12x minus 45 equals 0. At this point, I look to factor. What 2 numbers multiply out to negative 45 and add up to negative 12. Now, a lot of students wouldn't have these numbers off the top of their head because it's a 15 and a 3. So for students who struggle with that, and I honestly think a lot of you would, because we don't know 15 times tables, we can go with your graphing calculator. Under y1, you would put negative 45 divided by x, and under y2, the same thing in parentheses plus x, and then at the last column, you look for a negative 12. Look in the 2 previous columns in either order to get your solution. So x minus 15 times x plus 3 equals 0. Maybe it's the guy on the left. Maybe the x minus 15 equals 0. Maybe it's the guy on the right. Maybe the x plus 3 equals 0. Maybe it's both. Solve, adding 15 to both sides, subtracting 3. X is 15 and x is negative 3. Now, I think it's important that you understand both of these answers are good. There's nothing to reject. I know with the word problems, a lot of times we end up rejecting the negative if it represents a length or a specific time, because you can't have negative time or negative lengths. But when it's just a regular equation without context, you're going to keep all the answers you get. Okay, for number 2, first steps to distribute the 5. I do that and I get 3x squared minus 33 equals 5x minus 5. Get it all on one side. You want it to equal 0. Subtracting the 5x, then adding the 5, and I get 3x squared minus 5x minus 28 equals 0. This is a particularly challenging question. First, there's no common factor to divide out. So that means I have to go to plan B and multiply that last constant at the end by the leading coefficient. I do that. 28 times 3 is 84. So now I get x squared minus 5x minus 84. And I'm doing some scrap work here. I don't bother writing equals 0 because I'm just trying to figure out the factors. The two numbers that multiply out to 84 and add up to -5 are -12 and 7. Again, kind of tricky to get by yourself. You might want to use the calculator to help you out. And I got to tell you, there are times when I use the calculator to help me out because some of these numbers can get outrageous, as you'll see in today's lesson. Now, because I multiplied by 3 back here, I have to divide back in by 3 here. 12 over 3 minus 12 over 3 reduces to x minus 4. And the other one, we put that 3 up top. I get 3x plus 7 equals 0. Adding 4 to both sides, subtracting 7, x equals 4. 3x equals -7, dividing by 3, and I get x equals -7/3. Okay? So those are two good ability or challenging, not impossible, but challenging quadratic equations. If you can do those two, you are good with quadratic equations. Now, all we're going to do today is I'm going to give you word problems. We're going to solve word problems. Nothing new to teach. Give it a shot. Stop and start. On my end, I'm going to wait 5 seconds. On your end, as long as it takes. Okay. So leg squared plus leg squared is hypotenuse squared in a right triangle. So that gives me the first leg x squared plus x plus 17 squared is 25 squared. Double distribute the x plus 17. That gives me x squared plus another x squared plus 17x plus another 17x plus 289 is equal to 625. Now we got to do a little cleaning up here, okay? 1x squared, another x squared is 2x squared. There's 34 x's there. And then I subtract the 625 from both sides. And that gives me 2x squared plus 34x minus 336 is equal to 0. Now, what do I do next? Well, now I'm going to divide everything by 2 so that I can get a 1x squared, which is much easier to factor. I get x squared plus 17x minus 168 equals 0. And if I remember right, when I did this one, I went to the calculator because I don't know all the factors of 168 off the top of my head. So I go to the calculator. Under y1, I put -168 divided by x. Under y2, the same exact thing in parentheses plus x. And it's 24 times 7. Positive 24 times -7. Remember, in that last column, you look for a 17. Now, maybe it's the guy on the left. Maybe it's the guy on the right. Okay. And that gets me down to x plus 24 is equal to 0. And it gets me x minus 7 is equal to 0. Solving on the left, that gives me x is -24. Solving on the right, x is 7. But I reject -24 because I cannot have a negative length. So the legs are going to be 7. 7 plus 17 is 24. And the area is half of 7 times 24, which is 84 square centimeters. So that's it. That's what we get. Try this one. A little bit tricky here, but give it a shot. Okay. Now, tricky part of this is how do you set up the two numbers? But I underline that because it's really important. If the sum of the two numbers is 18, then that means one of them is going to be x. How do you get the other one? Well, let me ask you a question. If the sum of two numbers is 18 and one of them is 5, what's the other? 13, right? How'd you get 13? Well, 18 minus 5. What if one of them's 10? What's the other one? Well, that would be 8. So it's always 18 minus x, and that is the second number. Now, the product, when you multiply these two, you get 56. So x times 18 minus x is 56. And the weird thing about this is now the x squared is negative, which means that I want to move it to the other side, get rid of that negative sign. So I'm going to subtract 18x and add x squared to both sides. That gives me 0 equals x squared minus 18x plus 56. And here's the thing. This is the first time that we have seen a negative x squared in a quadratic, and we have to know that that x squared should be positive. That I have mentioned before. So we manipulate the equation to get that x squared to become positive, or it's a nightmare to factor. Factoring this guy, you hear my dog chewing on a bone in the crate there. It's x minus 4 times x minus 14 is 0, because x times x is x squared. X times negative 14 is minus 14x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times negative 14 is positive 56. Maybe it's the guy on the left. Maybe it's the guy on the right. X is 4, x is 14. And check it out. The product of these numbers is 56. And if you plug them into the original equation, if the first one's 4, the other one's 14. If the first one's 14, the second one is 4. So 4 and 14 are the two numbers. Try this one. Go ahead. A few more seconds, and then I'll come in here and do my, my answers to this. Difference of two consecutive evens is, squares of two consecutive evens is 68. So there are two numbers. The first one is x. The second one is x plus 2. Those are two consecutive even integers. Now it says the difference of their squares, and you've got to keep in mind the bigger one is the x plus 2. So we square that first and we get x plus 2 squared. Then we subtract the other one, x squared, because it says the difference of the squares. Here's the first one squared. I should say, let me rephrase that. The larger one, the second one squared, minus the first one squared. And I get 68. Okay, let's double distribute on that x plus 2. Okay. And then that gives me x squared plus 4x plus 4. And then minus the x squared. And lo and behold, something really, really cool happens. The x squared minus the x squared is 0. In other words, they cancel each other out. 2x's and 2x's make 4x's. So 4x plus 4 is 68. Subtracting 4, 4x is 64. Dividing by 4, and I get x is 16. The next number is 18. So 16 and 18 are the correct answers. Try this one. Okay, so the products of the ages of Sally and Joey now is 175 more than the product of their ages 5 years prior. If Sally's 20 years older than Joey, what are their current ages? So we can compare Sally and Joey first. Ages now, ages then. Sally now is x plus 20 because she's 20 years older than Joey. She's always going to be 20 years older than Joey. That's not going to change. Okay, if anybody's got a little brother or sister in their family and they think that they might catch up to you in age one day, well, you know that that is completely untrue. But 5 years ago, Sally was not x plus 20. She was only x plus 15. And Joey was x minus 5 because he's x now. 5 years ago, he was x minus 5. Now, the product of the Sally and Joey now is 175 more than the product of 5 years ago. So if I do the product now, that's x times x plus 20. It's going to be 175 more than the product then. Product of the ages now is the product of the ages then plus 175 because it's 175 more. So x times x plus 20 has got to equal x minus 5 times x plus 15 plus the 175. Okay, x squared plus 20x plus x squared plus 15x minus 5x minus 75 plus 175. Okay, that's what they're going to equal. X squared plus 20x is equal to x squared plus 10x plus 100. Oh, look at this. This is great. We got x squareds on both sides, so I can subtract it again. Cancel out. 20x is 10x plus 100. Subtracting 10x, I get 10x is 100, and x is equal to 10. And And if you check those ages, you will see that it works out exactly the way you want it to. Joey's 10, Sally's 30. Okay, let's try this one. See how you do on it there. All right. Let's see what we got. Always draw a diagram. In this diagram, you've got a rectangle that's 80 by 60. It's in the shape. It's a wedding photo in the shape of a rectangle, and then we're going to put matting of equal width all the way around it. The resulting matting and photo, the big blue rectangle, is covered by 5,084 square centimeters. Find the width of the matting, the X. Okay, so length times width gives you total, right? So the length is going to be 80, and then there's an X at both ends, so it's 2X plus 80. And the width is going to be, keep in mind, there's an X top and bottom, it's going to be 2X plus 60. So 2X plus 60 times 2X plus 80 is 5,084. Now let's double distribute. 2X times 2X, 4X squared. 2X times 80 is 160X. 60 times 2X is 120X. 60 times 80 is 4,800, and that will equal 5,084. Combining some like terms here, and also subtracting the 5,084 from both sides, and I get 4x squared plus 280x, that's the 160 and 120x's, minus 284 is 0. Look at that. They all share a 4 in common. Divide everything by 4. Always look for that first, that greatest common factor. I get x squared plus 70x minus 71 is 0. Ooh, nice easy factoring. X plus 71 times x minus 1 is 0. Maybe it's the guy on the left. Maybe it's the guy on the right. Subtracting 71, I get x is negative 71. Adding 1, I get x is 1. It is impossible to get a negative border here. So I reject that answer. The matting is 1 centimeter wide. Okay? You know, with any of these questions, some of these are very challenging. So don't hesitate to go back and watch that question that's giving you a hard time. Don't hesitate to watch it 2, 3, 4 times until it begins to make sense. And then, as always, if you have a question, reach out to me. Try this guy. Okay, now we got a swimming pool, 10 by 25. And there's a pool cover that's going to cover the pool plus a little bit of the walkway all the way around that covers it evenly. If the covered outside area is 74, just the outside is 74. How big is the overlap area? It's a tricky part to this. We'll talk about it in a minute. Length times width. So the length is going to be 2x plus 25, right? Because I got an x here and an x over here, even though I don't bother to write it. And the width is going to be 2x's, same reason, plus 10. And that's going to equal, and here's the tricky part, ready? It's going to equal the area, but the extra border adds 74 square meters. So you've got to figure out what the original area was. And of the rectangle, that original area was 250, right? 10 times 25. So the total is 25 plus 250, plus 74, which is 324. Double distributing on the left, I get 4x squared plus 50x plus 20x plus 250. Simplifying it all, subtracting the 325, getting all my x's together. 4x squared plus 70x minus 74 equals 0. Now, they don't all share a 4 in this one, but they do share a 2, so let's get rid of that 2. I divide everything by 2. That gives me 2x squared plus 35x minus 37 equals 0. And then we have to go to the strategy when the lead coefficient is not 1. So I multiply the 37 by 2 and I get 74. Now I factor this mess right here. That's x plus 37 times x minus 2. Since I multiplied by 2, I have to come back in and divide by 2. So on the left, that's irreducible. That'll be 2x plus 37. On the right, it'll be x minus 1. Maybe it's the guy on the left, maybe it's the guy on the right. The left comes out to a negative. I can't have a negative distance. So that's out. Reject it. X is equal to 1. The matting is 1 centimeter wide. Okay. Oh, look at this one. I forgot to animate this one. Oh, man. Animations. Fly in. Effect options. By paragraph. Slideshow. Hopefully this is not an issue. Good. Okay. An osprey, a fish-eating bird of prey. I love ospreys. They used to be, just how ecology works. Remember, a while back, it was very hard to find bald eagles. There were not many. There was a big problem with them. And then they got protected and so on and so forth. And now there's lots of them. Now, a long time ago, when there weren't many bald eagles on the upper Delaware River where I live, you'd see ospreys all over the place. Nowadays, there's a lot of bald eagles where I live. I see them pretty much every day, sometimes as many as a dozen in a day. And we really don't see many ospreys anymore. Very rare. Anyway, an osprey, it's a fish-eating bird of prey, dives towards the water to a salmon. I really don't think an osprey is going to pick up a salmon. But anyway, the height in meters of the osprey above the water, t seconds after it begins its nose first, actually they dive feet first, can be approximated by the function. The height of t, h of t, is 5t squared minus 30t plus 45. Determine the time it takes to reach a height of 20. So that just means instead of h of t, it's going to be 20. So your first step will be negative 5t squared minus 30t plus 45 equals 20. You take it from there. Go ahead. Okay, so let's get everything on one side. That gives me negative 5t squared minus 30t plus 25 equals 0. Then let's get rid of that negative 5 and divide everything by a negative 5. And that gives me t squared plus 6t minus 5 equals 0. I can factor that. That's t minus 5 times t minus 1 is 0, which means maybe it's the guy on the left, maybe it's the guy on the right. T is 5 and t is 1. There is a reason why it gives you 2 moments, and it's the nature of a parabola. And it doesn't say what height the osprey starts at. So for now, leave it t equals 5 and t equals 1. I think that's a fault with the question, the way they word it. The happy recap. Always look for a greatest common factor if the lead coefficient is not 1. You saw me do that at least 3 or 4 times tonight. With word problems, underline anything important, use it. Check them off as they go along. It's so important to get a sense of direction. One thing that I want to emphasize to you guys is when you get anything, like in this course, there are 2 different kinds of assessments we give. The one type is when I give you a project. You already had one, you got another one this week. You probably have another one, maybe 2 by the end of the semester. And then you also take quizzes, which you had at the end of last week. And you will get, probably 3 or 4 of them during the rest of the semester or half semester. When you get a multiple choice one, it's all or nothing. You give it your best shot. You do what you got to do. And there are strategies for multiple choice. But when you get a project and it's about showing your work and so on, sometimes students say to themselves, can I get the whole question right? And if they can't, they kind of quit on the question. And they say, well, forget it. I'm not going to do it because I can't get the whole thing right. But those project questions, those are partial credit. So make sure that you do things like underline, use it, check it off as you do it, write in a part to anything that you get that's right earns some kind of points. You don't want to get zeros on questions. That's what kills you. 2 ways to factor a quadratic, lead coefficient of 1. You got the AM technique and you got the calculator technique. If the lead coefficient's not 1, then multiply, and of course, it's also not the greatest common factor. Multiply the last term by it, factor the new equation, and divide back in with, I wrote with, but with the leading coefficient. Some things to do to succeed in class. I always want to remind you of this. Do all your homeworks. It's like extra credit. If you've missed a couple before now, make sure that you get them all in, and you'll get at least most of the 10% back. I have failed since I've been at CU. I think I've been at CU for 3 years, I think. And I've probably failed 3 or 4 students in 3 years. In every case, the students didn't do their homework. In each of those cases, had they done all of their homeworks, not only by doing the homeworks is your grade likely to go up, but none of them failed by more than 10 points. So had they done all of their homeworks, odds are just doing the homework would have gotten them to pass the class. How you go about your business is critical. Take a lot of pride in your work, okay? Make sure that if you do it, it's got your name on it. You want it to represent yourself and your family in a really good way. Pay attention to due dates, very important. Work together on projects, collaborate. It's a great way to learn. Take pride in your work. Second time I mentioned that. And then every day is a chance to realize your dream. Look, I don't know what future you want for yourself, but whatever that future is, every day you either put a brick in the building that's going to represent your future or you don't. And if you go a whole lot of days without putting any bricks up, then you don't build that future you want. But if every single day you're doing something to get to that future, then you're progressing and eventually you're going to get there.